this won't be.
Okay.
Damodar Asakam is hooked up. But.
Hare
Everyone's going to get a book. Okay. You're doing mantra 7? So that's what the mark is.
Yes. Your mark is, yeah, mantra 7.
Mantra 7. And you want me to read the Sanskrit first? Hare Krishna, sir.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Invocation.
Do the invocation first.
Oh, yeah, we chant the first mantra first.
You chant the first mantra together. Together.
Usually, yeah.
Okay, let's do it then. The invocation.
Page 13.
Okay. Together or responsibly?
Will you chant, will you repeat in your...
One line at a time.
Yes.
Okay. Om Purnamadaha Purnamidam
Om Purnamadaha Purnamidam
Purnat Purnamudachyate
Purnat Purnamudachyate
Purnasya Purnamadaya
Purnasya Purnamadaya
Purnam Eva Vashishyate.
Purnam Eva Vashishyate.
3 times?
Yeah, usually you do it 3 times and then everybody gets a chance if they...
And everyone gets the chance. Okay. Om Purnamadaha Purnamidam
Om Purnamadaha Purnamidam
Purnat Purnamudachyate
Purnat Purnamudachyate
Purnasya Purnam Adaya
Purnasya Purnamadaya
Purnam Eva Vashishyate
Purnam Eva Vashishyate
Om Purnam Adaha Purnamidam
Om Purnamadaha Purnamidam
Purnat Purnam Udachyate
Purnat Purnamudachyate
Purnasya Purnam Adaya
Purnasya Purnamadaya
Purnam Eva Vashishyate
Purnam Eva Vashishyate Om Purnamadaha Purnamidam Om Purnamadaha Purnamidam Purnat Purnam Udachyate Purnat Purnam Udachyate Purnasya Purnam Adaya Purnasya Purnam Adaya Purnam Eva Vashishyate Purnam Eva Vashishyate
Om Purnamada Purnamidam.
Om Purnamadaha Purnamidam
Purnat Purnamadashyate.
Purnam Purnamudachyate
Purnasya Purnamadaya.
Purnasya Purnamadaya
Purnam Eva Vashishyate.
Purnam Eva Vashishyate
Om
Sorry.
Om Purnam Adaha Purnamidam
Om Purnamadaha Purnamidam
Purnat Purnamudachyate
Purnat Purnamudachyate
Purnasya Purnamadaya
Purnasya Purnamadaya
Purnam Eva Vashishyate
Purnam Eva Vashishyate
Om Purnamadaha Purnamidam.
Om Purnamadaha Purnamidam
Purnat Purnamudachyate.
Purnat Purnamudachyate mudachyate.
Purnasya Purnamadaya
Purnasya Purnamadaya.
Purnameva Vashishyate
Purnameva vashishyate.
Om Purnamadaha Purnamidam.
Om Purnamadaha Purnamidam.
Purnat Purnamudachyate.
Purnat Purnamudachyate.
Purnapya Purnamadaya.
Purnasya Purnamadaya.
Purnamudachyate.
Purnameva vashishyate.
Om Purnamadaha Purnamidam.
Om Purnamadaha Purnamidam.
Purnam Pudachyate.
Purnat Purnamudachyate.
Purnasya Purnamadaya.
Purnasya Purnamadaya.
Purnameva Vashishyate.
Purnameva vashishyate.
Om Purnamadaha Purnamidam.
Om Purnamadaha Purnamidam.
Purnat Purnamudachyate.
Purnat Purnamudachyate.
Purnasya Purnamadaya.
Purnasya Purnamadaya.
Purnameva vashishyate.
Purnameva vashishyate.
Do you read the translation?
I read the translation and I just explain it in like 1 minute.
Why did you do it?
Well, first I read it. Okay, the personality of God is perfect and complete. And because he is completely perfect, all emanations from him, such as this phenomenal world, are perfectly equipped as complete wholes. Whatever is produced of the complete whole is also complete in itself. Because he is the complete whole, even though so many complete units emanate from him, he remains the complete balance. So here we get a good example is the universe, or the unlimited universes, but in each universe, everything is there. Everything is perfectly perfect and complete. All the necessities in every part of the universe, every planet, has exactly what it needs to sustain life for that particular planet. So here on our Earth planet, we have everything we need complete. But even though all these units emanate from him, he still doesn't lose anything. He still remains a complete balance. So that's my quick 30 seconds, 1 minute explanation.
It's pretty conceivable, isn't it?
See, well, yeah, it's a chinta beta beta tattva. Simultaneous.
Have you explained Shincha Beta Beta Tattva?
I don't know. I could say it's simultaneously,
Inconceivable.
inconceivably, simultaneously one and different.
Okay, so you want me to speak from Mantra 7, right?
Yes, you can read that. We can chant it, but we don't chant it on our own.
Okay,
We can chant it.
chanting
We'll repeat what you chant.
responsibly.
Yeah. What page?
49. Yasmin sarvani bhutani
Yasmin sarvani bhutani
atmaiva bhutvijanata
Atmaiva bhutvijanata
tatra ko mohaka shoka
Tatra ko mohaka shoka
ekatvam anupasyatah
Ekatvam anupasyata
Yasmin sarvani bhutani
Yasmin sarvani bhutani
atmaiva bhutvijanata
Atmaiva bhutvijanata
tatra ko mohaka shoka
Tatra ko mohaka shoka
ekatvam anupasyatah
Ekatvam anupasyata
Yasmin sarvani bhutani
Yasmin sarvani bhutani
atmaiva bhutvijanata
Atmaiva bhutvijanata
tatra ko mohaka shoka
Tatra ko mohaka shoka
ekatvam Ekatvam Anupashyataha.
Ekatvam Anupashyataha.
Translation. One who sees all living entities as spiritual sparks in quality one with the Lord becomes a true knower of things. What then can be illusion or anxiety for him? Purport. Except for the Majjhima Adhikari and Uttama Adhikari discussed above. I guess you discussed that last week.
Yes.
Okay. No one can directly see the spiritual position of a living being. The living entities are qualitatively one with the Supreme Lord, just as the sparks of a fire are qualitatively one with the fire. Yet sparks are not fire as far as quantity is concerned, for the quantity of heat and light present in the sparks is not equal to that in fire. The Mahabhagavata, the great devotee, sees oneness in the sense that he sees everything as the energy of the Supreme Lord. Since there is no difference between the energy and the energetic, there is the sense of oneness. Although from the analytical point of view, heat and light are different from fire, there is no meaning to the word fire without heat and light. In synthesis, therefore, heat, light, and fire are the same. Can I stop and speak a little?
Yes.
Okay. Omagana Timiram Dasya Viranjana Shalakaya Chaksho Ummilitam Dena Tasmai Shri Guru Namaha Ukam Karoti Vachva Bangam Nangayati Guri Vatkripa Tamaham Mande Shri Guru Dinataram Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shivati Bhaktivedanta Swamin Iti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Vicharini Vishesha Shanyavari Pastya Chade Satarane Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasili Gaur Bhaktivinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. This verse from Isopanisad important verse. Every verse is important. What makes it important, though, of course, is when it becomes relevant to our life. Difference between philosophy that is not relevant and philosophy that is relevant is that it becomes practical experience when we can apply it in our life and see things from a different perspective. Oftentimes that happens to many practitioners of different philosophies, is that when they become more adept in understanding the philosophical principles which they're studying, they begin to see things from a different frame of reference. And because we begin to see what is supposed to come about to a philosopher of Krishna consciousness is that we see everything connected to Krishna. If one sees everything connected to Krishna, then as this verse describes, he becomes a true knower of things. And what then can be illusion or anxiety for him? So, when we hear this word anxiety, it should be relevant. It's something that we can hone in on and say, okay, it's an ideal, nice principle, and many philosophies aim at how to overcome anxiety by various practices of controlling the mind, controlling the senses, and emptying out unwanted thoughts from the mind, meditating. There are various approaches in an effort to actually confront anxiety, but oftentimes it's, even though it may be something that can be applied for a certain period of time for the day, the peace, which is of course the other side of anxiety, seems to be very elusive and hard to maintain, hard to sustain. Therefore, this verse recommends the evolution of a spiritual vision, which enables a person to see things, everything, both material and spiritual. I want to speak of both everything that is material and spiritual energy, but also every living being, which is also spiritual energy. See it connected to the Supreme. One who sees, as the verse says, one who sees all living entities as spiritual sparks in quality one with the Lord becomes a true knower of things. It's a vision which, in the commentary, Srila Prabhupada describes as the characteristics for what he describes as the Uttama Adhikari, or Uttama Adhikari, or Majjhima Adhikari. It's somebody who's in a very elevated state of consciousness. It's probably one of the things that you alluded to in your previous verse, because it was mentioned, right? Uttama Adhikaris, Majjhima Adhikaris. And it's not something which is, of course, immediately accessible to any practitioner of Krishna consciousness, although there may be very rare cases that, such as, in fact, you can think of one, Prahlad Maharaj. Prahlad Maharaj was a 5-year-old boy who was a Mahabhagavata. Someone may say. And of course it gives us hope. If a 5-year-old boy can be a Mahabhagavata, then certainly somebody who's more advanced in years has a chance of becoming it. But of course Prahlad Maharaj's Mahabhagavata status was achieved as a result of something he experienced from a previous life, and also what he experienced from within the womb of his mother, which is that his mother was hearing from a highly elevated soul, Mahabhagavata, Narada Muni, and Prahlad actually heard everything while he was still within the womb, and therefore he was in very advanced consciousness after taking his birth. Of course, this is, of course, a very good example how in parenting, it's ideal for the parent who wants to have an involved child to be given the child an opportunity to hear a transcendental message even while within the womb. The evidence is there that the child can benefit within the womb. What to speak of when the child takes its birth and then begins living its life. Prahlad displayed all the qualities of a Mahabhagavata at 5 years of age. One of the characteristics that Prahlad Maharaj displayed is he made no distinctions between friends and enemies. That was very elevated state of consciousness sometimes, especially in this age. It's very hard to think that what is no distinction between friend and enemy. But Prahlad Maharaj described this when his teachers, Sunda and Amarka, who were trying to teach him diplomacy, politics, and because his father was a great king, and his father wanted his son to learn all the ideals of a good king, he wanted to invest into his son, and therefore he had him study all this diplomacy. And Prahlad Maharaj had a very difficult time hearing it, because Prahlad said that you're trying to teach me this diplomacy, which is based upon the concept of friend and enemy, but I offer my obeisance to the Supreme Lord, whose external energy, whose illusory energy, makes people think in terms of friends and enemies. And he said, don't see that way, and therefore he was resistant to their teaching. Of course, friend and enemy, this is only one aspect, but this verse speaks about sees all living entities as equal. So if to see them all as equal means if we see one as friend and one as enemy, then we're not being able to see them as equal. How do we see them as equal? We see them as equal as spiritual sparks in quality one with the Supreme, and he becomes a true knower of things. So the person who is a Mahabhagavata is somebody who transcends the dualities of this world. Duality is not only friend and enemy, heat and cold, happiness and distress, honor and dishonor. In fact, in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says in the 6th chapter that for one who conquers his mind, he reaches the super soul who is within his heart. Super soul is reached and he attains tranquility. And for such a person, heat and cold, happiness, distress, honor, dishonor, they're all the same. He's transcended duality. But to transcend duality means that one has to see everything. In the absolute state of consciousness is to see everything as belonging to Krishna. Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Aham sarvasya prabhu matak sakam pravartate. He says, I am the source of this material world, I am the source of the spiritual world. Everything is emanating from me, and the wise who know this perfectly, they serve me with devotion, with all of their hearts. They see Krishna. I'll give you like a very simple example. My spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, uses this example in one place to describe the characteristics of a person who's in spiritual consciousness. He uses the example of a cat. He says a cat, Prabhupada uses many examples, analogies, to help us bring things closer to our experience of this world. In fact, Prabhupada even uses an analogy to explain why analogies are important. He says, if you want to see the moon moving in the sky at night, you can stand there and stare at the moon. It's very difficult to watch it going across the sky. He said, but if you hold something closer, like the two branches of a tree, closer to your eyes, then if you look to the moon, to the branches of the tree, you can see, without waiting too long, the moon is moving from one branch to the next. Because it's closer, within. So he says in the same way, analogies help us to see things which are difficult to conceive by using an example of something which is closer to our experience. And therefore we can see. So Prabhupada, he uses the example of a cat. He says a cat carries in her mouth a kitten, and the cat carries in her mouth a rat. And now, I'm sure most of you know, I do. When I grew up, I was very young. I had a cat. I even remember the cat had a litter out in the back porch of kittens, and I wanted to immediately go out because I saw these little kittens, and my sister was stopping. My older sister was stopping me. No, don't go out. And so I opened up the door, started to go out and to approach the kittens, and the cat didn't like it. So as soon as I went back in, the cat picked one kitten up in her mouth, went up into the rafters, put the kitten there, came back down, took another kitten, picked her kitten up in the mouth, put the kitten in the rafters, and she secured them from little old me who was curious about the kittens. But anyone knows that when a cat picks up a kitten in her mouth, the kitten is not at all, the kitten is feeling protected. My mother is coming to take me and protect me. So he gives the example of the cat holding the kitten in her mouth. And the kitten doesn't feel any fear. But when the same cat opens her mouth and shows her teeth to the rat has a different experience. In fact, the cat used to bring field mice into the house, sometimes into the back porch. So the rat runs in fear, whereas the kitten is thinking, here's my mother coming to take me to some shelter. So the difference of perception, of course, is that for the cat, it's protection, but the same mouth and the same teeth, when displayed to the mouse, it's different perception. There's fear. Why? Because the rat sees, or the mouse sees, the cat is deaf. And everyone, from the highest planet to the lowest planet to the lowest species of life, has to overcome death. So one who has spiritual vision means that there is no fear of death, because one sees that I'm spirit, I am eternal, I have an eternal relationship with the Supreme. I've forgotten that relationship, but if I can see that at the time of giving up this body, that actually, just as Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita, as a person takes off old clothes and puts on new clothes, the soul simply takes off or gives up the old body and accepts a new body. And a very well-known verse, which is oftentimes explained, Dehi no sminyata dehi komaram jovanam jara, as the embodied soul continually passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. Dhiras tatra numuyati. Dhira means one who realizes the self. Dhira. He knows who he is. Self-realized soul is not bewildered by that change. So this verse is describing what then can be illusion or anxiety for such a person who sees all living entities as spiritual sparks in relationship to the Supreme. And it's one way to transcend duality of this world. And wherever there's duality, there is anxiety, is fear. Right? This is good. If I do it, it is good, but then we do something which is good, we become fearful of losing it. Good and bad. Good and bad. What's good is what makes me happy, what's bad is what makes me sad. But for one who's dhira means he transcends this duality because he sees everything connected to the Supreme. I'll give you another example, and we'll use examples because, as we said, analogies are good for bringing a spiritual concept, closer to home, to our understanding. This is a verse, several verses actually, which speaks about dreams. I like using this analogy because it's relevant. Because usually I ask everybody, have you ever had a dream before? No, usually everybody's hand goes up. And then I ask everybody, anybody ever had a good dream? Most hands go up. And then I say, everyone had a bad dream? And most hands go up. So here we go, we have a platform everybody can relate to. And the verse explains that although the duality of this material world ultimately doesn't exist, the conditioned soul experiences it under the influence of its conditioned intelligence. And the speaker says, this imaginary experience of a world that is separate from Krishna can be compared to the acts of a person who dreams of something desirable or something horrible. Or he daydreams of something he would like to have or something he'd like to avoid. He creates a reality that has no existence beyond his own imagination. That's the verse. I've just said it quickly, but I'll explain it now. what the verse is saying, if you have a real good dream, however you define a good dream, everybody will define a good dream in a different way according to what they dreaming of. Sometimes you may be dreaming of something during the day, and then you dream about it at night, and you say, that's a good dream. So when you have a good dream, and usually the symptom of a good dream is you're enjoying it. But then you wake up, and then you're sad. It was only a dream. But if you have a bad dream, anybody's experience, when you have a bad dream and you wake up, you're happy.
Yeah.
Why are you happy? That was only a dream. But the happiness that you experience, or the sadness that you experience, is not connected to reality. It was only connected to a dream. So what is the relevance of the happiness and sadness when it's only connected to a dream? So the verse describes that there are night dreams, a person dreams of something desirable or something horrible. And then he says there's daydreams. We dream of something we'd like to have, or dream of something we'd like to avoid. Then we create a reality that has no existence beyond our imagination. I can go into a lot, but I know that I'm limited as to how much you usually have the schedule, but we all can, at least can visualize what a daydream is like. What was that song by the 11 Spoonful? Anyone who was back in the 60s. Daydream.
Or even daydream.
You know it. Yeah. You should listen to it all the time. What a day for a daydream. So the daydream, we dream of something, yeah. We think daydream of something, we're gone to sleep, but we're dreaming of something that would be very wonderful. That's it, when I have it, then everything is forward from that point on. But it doesn't always work like that. So it's not connected to reality because we're dreaming about something for our own enjoyment, and we're seeing it as separate from Krishna. When we think everything is for my enjoyment, then we don't understand that everything in this world, the external energy, the living beings, all parts and parcels, they're all connected to Him. And just as a hand is immediately meaningful when it's connected to the rest of the body, and the hand does the work by placing the food in the mouth takes the food, it goes to the stomach, and it goes to the stomach, and all the limbs of the body are simultaneously satisfied, nourished. So in the same way, the living being is connected to the Supreme, but if it has no connection, it's like a hand that's not connected to the body. What's its function? It has no function. Its function is only when it's connected, otherwise there's no function. The same way, because we're ultimately eternal spiritual sparks, as the verse described, connected to the Supreme, we have a functioning relationship to the Supreme, and therefore we have to develop the vision of seeing everything connected to the Supreme. So this verse speaks about duality. It compares the night dream and also the daydream. We daydream of something we would like to avoid. We create a reality that has no existence beyond our imagination. And then the end of the verse goes on to say, the tendency of the mind is to accept and reject things on the basis of what is pleasing to me. But an intelligent person should control the mind and overcome the tendency to see things separate from Krishna. And when the mind is thus controlled, the result is that his intelligence becomes purified and he experiences fearlessness. So essentially that's an introduction to what this verse is speaking about. This is, as we said, is the characteristic of of a Mahabhagavata, a great soul, who is, and there are many examples given of great souls who were completely undisturbed at the time of giving up their bodies, because they were just like the kitten, seeing that what's there to be disturbed about? This is a temporary body. I've come to fulfill some of my desires in this body, but actually I want to use this body to its full potential. Therefore, let me use this body to help me understand what is my connection with the Supreme. Therefore, the greatest fear is the fear of having to give up the body. Of course, there's many other fearful situations in life, but the verse explains that this vision of the Mahabhagavata is no illusion or no anxiety for him. So, I would say that, and just in summary, and to end this topic, because we're going to chant some prayers, Namadarasta. To end this topic, I would just simply like to say that the Mahabhagavata is a rare soul, and although the Mahabhagavata is a rare soul, the opportunity to elevate our consciousness can come as a result of associating with a rare soul, somebody who is situated in that consciousness. And I believe that's probably why P.R.I. Mohan Prabhu has had all of you reading from Isopanisad, and reading the verses of Isopanisad, and reading the commentaries of Isopanisad, because when you read the verses, and you read the commentaries, and you discuss the commentaries of Isopanisad, you get the opportunity to actually hear from the self-realized soul who's manifesting himself in the pages of Isopanisad. Srila Prabhupada. I mean, many times people ask me, when did I first meet Srila Prabhupada? And because I tell them I met Srila Prabhupada in 1972. And then they say, oh, where did you see him? And I said, well, I met him in a bookstore. And the first question they'll usually ask is, what was he doing in a bookstore? And my answer was also even more surprising than he was in a bookstore. My answer is, he was sitting on a shelf. And that really, what was he doing sitting on a shelf? And that was my first meeting with Prabhupada. He was sitting on a shelf at Brentanos on Wisconsin Avenue in Washington, D.C. When I walked in there looking for a book on yoga, and I opened up the Bhagavad Gita as it is, and I saw, as I was flipping through the pictures, I saw a picture of a yogi sitting in a lotus position in deep meditation, and I saw the soul rising up through the chakras and going up through the crown chakra and rising up beyond, breaking the coverings of the universe and coming to the lotus feet of Radha and Krishna. But I, of course, didn't understand anything about it when I saw the picture. Just saw the picture and visualized it. The picture's worth 1,000 words. But I said, this looks like a great book on yoga. So that was my first meeting with Prabhupada. I took the book home and I started reading a book on yoga. And little did I know at the time that I was associating with the Mahabhagavata. And as I associated with the Mahabhagavata, and I was very carefully, systematically actually, every night when I came home from work, I was reading some verses of Bhagavad Gita every day. Something happened. Something happened. I mean, I can go into the details of the transformation, but I don't have time. But my consciousness changed, and my perception of reality changed. I saw things differently. And anybody who's come in contact with these books, they can testify that if you read these books with a sense of a systematic effort to study and to understand. Even if you only read one page, Srila Prabhupada said, even if you only read one word, even if you only read one page, and you just try to understand, you'll see that the subject matter is really deep. It's deep. And when that depth enters into the heart, and your perception of this world begins to change, then it's no longer just philosophy. It's practical. It's a way of life. It's a way of life. It's a way to see everything connected to Krishna. Except I began to see everything connected to what Prabhupada was telling me about Krishna. But there was no blockage. It was transparent. There's no blockage. And seeing everything through Prabhupada's eyes and Prabhupada was opening up the window to the spiritual world and introducing me his Krishna. So I'm quite sure that P.R.A. Mohan Prabhu is giving all of you the opportunity to associate with Prabhupada by going systematically through Isopanisad. And he's very kind, he's very compassionate. And Krishna speaks about such persons in Bhagavad Gita. He says, Yaidam paramam guyam advaktesha vijasati, for one who explains this secret to others, for him devotional service is guaranteed, and at the end he comes back to me. Nachatasman manusheshu kashchine priyakritama. Says there's no servant in this world who's more dear to me than he will, nor will there ever be one more dear. Krishna wants everybody, doesn't want them to stay here in this world and to live in suffering. He wants everyone back. And therefore he sends his devotees who come, and his devotees engage his followers in the same mission. And we are very fortunate to have come in contact with the Mahabhagavata, who's changed our lives. And if we can simply serve him in some way by helping others to see the great benefits of reading these wonderful books, our life will become happy, free from illusion and anxiety. Can we stop there?
If anybody has questions. I have a question.
Is Krishna going to be stumped this Swami?
No, I don't think so. Maybe exactly, you might not know the answer, but you talk about these books, and basically they're transcendental, and hearing from them could basically bring you to the spiritual world. How many of these books are there?
How many are there?
Yeah, besides this Isopanisad, Bhagavad Gita, is there any others?
But yeah, there's I mean, how many were published in print, or
Yeah,
how many?
yeah. No, how many are in English?
Oh, I don't know. Must be at least 80 to 100, right?
Yeah,
The Prabhupada's books.
Yeah.
The Prabhupada. Yeah.
80 to 100.
Yeah.
So that should keep you engaged for some
Keep you busy. Everyone should not leave tonight without a full set of Prabhupada's books.
Everyone should quit their job to see and read.
I don't have to quit the jobs. I was reading every night when I came home from work.
Right.
It's just, I just stopped doing everything else I was doing after I went to work. I just changed everything. Instead of doing all the other nonsense things I was doing after work,
Right.
I just instead was reading Bhagavad Gita. Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, so we're going to chant, well, Maharaj will chant and then we'll follow. Where's the papers? Can we get that?
Down
It's
there.
in the shelf.
Not in
I also have a different table at my
there.
The papers. Like a different table, man?
Yep.
Don't worry.
That's good.
Is this okay?
Yeah.
This is narrow.
Huh?
You want to face this way?
Yes.
These ones.
Don't need it?
That's an analogy.
So what we're doing now is we're going to, everyone's getting a sheet, and then we come up and we offer a V-lamp down the main service process.
Hare